Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us at TAP series, the second edition of the Talks on Architecture and Beyond. So welcome to this educational and learning journey together with inspiring professionals from the architect and design industry across Southeast Asia. For the guests joining us for the first time, welcome to the TAP family. This is our fifth talk, and if you want to watch the previous ones, you may go to YouTube, Cosentino TV channel. So, long story short, this year the TAP series is about the making of architecture and the notion of time. Within this context, we aim to highlight the importance and values of working together a more conscious architecture, how to build better and how to design more sustainable and resilient spaces. And Cosentino is very aligned with these principles and values of helping to be more sustainable, because to protect the environment is our most important commitments, as it is in our DNA. The eco-design and sustainability are principles in the development of our new products. And these are not only words, but facts. As a result, products like Dekton, a carbon neutral certified product and capable to absorb its own waste, and the new Silestone, the ultimate mineral hybrid surface with some collections that are manufactured with recycled materials, thanks to the use of the new hybrid technology proprietary of Cosentino. Just to keep you in the loop, hybrid is the Cosentino's response to a society that increasingly demands more sustainability from products and more responsibility for brands. So stay tuned, because in 1 week and a half, we will be launching a lot of novelties in the market related to Silestone and hybrid technology. And well, after this short introduction, I would like to give the floor to Jan, as always, the curator of TAP series. Hi, Jan.
Hi,
hello.
Good afternoon, good evening, Maria.
Good evening. I leave you the floor to you.
Thank you very much. So welcome everyone for this second edition of the TAP series, Talk on Architecture and Beyond, so with Cosentino. And so if you are in Singapore, you might know that we are in this heightened alert. And so after being live in the showroom last month, now we are all back at home, and it is for the betterment of basically the situation, and things will be improving. So we are continuing our talk on architecture and beyond. And this year, as Maria was explaining, we are dissecting the making of architecture to understand the different stages of a project, and also the behind the scene of design studio, architecture studio, not only from Singapore, but also from Southeast Asia. We have friends from the Philippines for the last quarter, and this quarter we will be having Malaysia as our guest country for the next one. But today, to talk about the making of architecture, we invited one of the most well-known architect in Singapore, and we'll be looking at the practice, the design process, and to understand what it takes to be an architect and to create architecture, to create this built environment that is surrounding us, basically for the people, and to understand this typology behind that. So today we invited Alan Tay from Formworks. How to introduce Alan? You know, like for me, Alan has been a long time acquaintance, and becoming also more friends, and even more that he became the director of ArchiFest, and it was a very natural transmission from what we did on our end towards Alan. But beyond that, Alan is the co-founder of Formworks. Formworks, you might have seen definitely their work. It is all over some publications and social media. So Formworks believes in the transformative power of design in effecting improvement to lives. They are interested in architectural types, engaging with it as a means to challenge dominant paradigms and to further the architectural discourse. So that's why Alan will be talking to us today. And so they often find themselves transversing along boundaries, sometimes in oxymoronic situation, or at times attempting to reach a hybridized solution. So this approach to design has motivated and kept them interested in the craft of architecture, so craft, throughout the firms for 20 years. Alan, you look so young. How can it be 20 years in the making? So, the floor is yours, and I'm very much looking forward to understand the behind the scene and the crafting of architecture, to understand how it is to be human, to develop architecture. Thanks again, Alan, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jan, and thank you, Cosentino, for inviting me to this wonderful platform to share some of the thoughts that obviously has been brewing in my mind for the past 20 years in the making of architecture. And I think I'll just jump straight to it. Never that good in this sort of a format. I like to hide behind my PowerPoints, and I hope it works. Let's start. Okay. Sorry. Okay, is it on full screen? Hi. Is actually, I tried again. Okay, how's that? Is it working? Okay, I'll do that again. So where do I go? But in the chat group or in the is there? So sorry, let me see. Okay, is this the one? I can't, let me see. Oh, okay, here, maybe. No? How about this? That's it? Okay. All right. Yeah, finally. Formworks. I'll just do a quick kind of a brief introduction about. Jan did a fantastic job. I just go through this. We are essentially an architectural practice, but we dabble into little bits of architecture, interior, placemaking, experience design, design thinking, and research. A couple of these things are recent endeavors that we undertake in the past few years. We have 4 partners since its founding, and we have been about coming to 22 years. We are in the 22nd year, coming to 23rd years. We have 3 studios, a team of 135 people, mean average age of 33. And you see the faces. I'm Alan, and my partners Sito, Gwen, and Berlin. That's been me for the last 22 years. Our design philosophy hinges on this idea of the importance of relationships, the relationship between man and nature. We are very keen in this idea of giving form to the future. And going back to today's topic, typological margins, it is something that more underlines the methods of the way we deal with design, work with architecture as a kind of rational way of conducting design. Because design, as you know, anyone will attest that these are the kind of forces that play: client, users, architect themselves, the philosophies, the stat boards, the builder, budget, neighbors, environment, feng shui, climate, has so much in any design or architecture. You are constantly driven by these parameters. So you could see that the work of architecture could be, in the end, the sum of all these items, a resolution of all these things. You can't run from that. But precisely, there's so much inferences, there's so much forces that we reconcile. Hence, often question that we ask: how do we clear? What is then eminent? What in terms of communication? If building can talk, what do you talk about when there's so much voices? So we feel that in our work in communication between our teams and our designers and architects, a very rational framework is necessary in order to make sense, to prioritize design, to make decisions, to figure things out. And one of the things that we're definitely interested in related to architecture is types. The idea of types, typology, which I explained a bit. As everyone will attest to, the types are in a way giving shapes and dimension and form to what a particular thing is. For instance, the house, the primitive hut by Marc-Antoine Roger, talks about that. This is the first idea of what a shelter is. And on the right, the house archetype. Any kids will draw this, but in our context, perhaps my kid is drawing a house archetype that's heavily influenced by what the house is more commonly found in Singapore. They're in fashion, in where we are interested in types that begin to be different, like in this Shi Chan's Hakmi collection or the Flower Man in Calcutta, where businesses, trades, functions begin to impregnate, pollute, and change and morph and define what fashion or clothing is or shelter. In my earlier years of education, I'm obviously heavily influenced by Jung Hee-juk with his Victims and Monsters. In contemporary culture and consumption, Nando's kind of interpretation of what chocolate is. And of course, who cannot be influenced by Kuhas in my time as an educator, as a student, that OMA, when he came out, Jesuit campus, the two libraries, that the entire library is conceived as a kind of continuation of the city boulevard. The Shiriguban, where when he drew out this design, the curtain wall house, I was so tremendously excited because the house, imagine the shelter, the envelope of a house, can take the form of a curtain, where it transforms the relation of space, relationship of the interior, the house itself with the city, and thoroughly be interrogated through these mixed types. And of course, who will not know Villa Malaparte? That's famous in some of the movies, where this poetry, the staircase to heaven, the stairs to the roof, forms the imagination, it fuels the imagination of what house could be. That house is no longer shelter or collection of rooms, but in this case, dominated by this poetry, the opponent kind of connection to the entire landscape. And of course, in the case, in more contemporary works by Sho Fujimoto, his final wooden house, although I see more installation, but as a final house that he conceived house as a collection of Jenga blocks, where relationship of space flows from one to another, where in this house NA, where it's more like shelves, where the definition of furniture, boundary between furniture type and house is entirely blurred, where rooms disappeared, and when circulation corridors disappeared in this whole collection of shelves that he conceived as a house. Or in a case that a work that really intrigued me was the Water Garden by Junya Ishigami, and that boundaries, that the idea of landscape design of a park, and is truly interrogated by this version of a landscape or water garden of species, or where certain boundaries of what used to be landscape is challenged, or territory is challenged. Or in the work of Yang Yongliang, he's seemingly, for guys not familiar, if you on closer inspection, he's seemingly feng shui kind of a former representation of his art is in fact a collection of building types that he used as a way of like the word san qiong sui jing, in a way of kind of critique and giving voice to what is happening in China and into the environment. So things that I have just flashed kind of fall into this category in terms of if you look at it as type and minus the messaging, minus the what is communicating. As a method, it deals with a lot of crossing, in fact, sometimes oxymoronic relations, or at best sometimes a hybridized situation, or I call it sometimes a plus. So it reminds me of this particular publication, a page that I leave from a publication by Shop, that this cross between really a sheep and a wolf, and where I think the imagery is very strong in terms of kind of in a very visual way, in a close attempt to encapsulate what I'm trying to kind of strive at or work with, the both and end. And I thought that has a lot of relevance to today's context. In this image, the mystical rhinocon, a kind of thing that perhaps we may make ourselves relevant as architects. That, you know, I always in the sense that if AI will replace us, maybe one way forward is to do things in such a hybridized way that the artificial intelligence will have a hard time, a distant way to be able to catch on. That for one, they can't recognize this. They think that this is a unicorn rather than which is a hybrid of a horse and a rhino, and that this must place us in a good situation. So I'm this person always kind of navigating between the boundaries of established types. So in other words, I'm interested in clear types, but it is the mixing of the situation that can does a few things. I think it interrogated and questions dominant assumptions. It sometimes offers solutions to unique situations, but it's this landscape, these boundaries that we are very interested to be in. And you can see from like in these cases, the houses that we did over the years, they always have this kind of that goes with something in front of it as a plus. It's called a house plus. That, it is a house, but in sometimes an alleyway too. Sometimes it's a ramp. Sometimes it's extended. Sometimes it is a grotto. Sometimes it's a window. Sometimes it's a nursery. Sometimes it's terracing. Sometimes there's a slope. Sometimes it's about open. In the idea that house is a protected shelter, but why sometimes it's open. That it creates opportunity in precising, addressing, align with the aspiration of client, but more importantly, create new situation of spatial opportunities from this, bringing different defined types together. So in this case, it's one of our earliest house, alleyway house, I think completed in early 2000, where it was an inter-terrace that we want to think about, okay, a sandwich typology, what do you do with it? So we began to think that alleyway maybe is a way of doing it, because the client speak about how he wants certain publicness, yet house doesn't want it. It's not a boulevard. He wants a certain sense of privacy, some part that's shady, some part that is more private, some part that's open, which we find a lot of connection and parallel between an alleyway, which could be adopted in this situation, and begin to craft the spaces the way light shimmer in the surfaces that is constructed, that is good for the pets, and less structured and more open-ended in that sense. In terms of enclosure, there's no front glass door or enclosure to speak. It is porous in the sense, but security has to be kind of managed in a different way from what is normally accepted. So this image is a void where you see the pets occupying the dining table of the house, and the diagram shows how the messing, the private spaces in black, are hovering over this alleyway that we created, that defines the gray space, which is between the walls, which are the communal spaces. And the terrace house was an idea that we have, that in a congested environment, that we were a semi-detached typology, that we create this idea of terracing, how walking through the house, connecting from one point to the other, to one room to the other, is more like a walk in the park, that begin to take place when you enter the gate to the door, and all the way from the house where you are connected various level by this continuous meandering circulation that connects the room, but creating a kind of experience on its own, where it crosses the bridge and end up in ultimately a terracing roof garden, which is more a landscape rather than a something that's manicured, that offers back to the context. And in window house that was completed in recent times in collaboration with Super Assembly, a fellow friend of mine, that we challenges the idea of we have windows in houses, and then how do you kind of begin to see that window will reach a certain critical number or use and deploy and position in a way that it begins to shape and kind of inform how the house would be experienced. That at what point the window takes over, that it is the kind of defining element within the house in terms of what it used to do. It's still functioning, bringing light. It controls what scenes to be viewed. It controls the amount of sound. It controls the airflow within the house. Beyond that, it takes on that bigger dimension in this situation, where one begins to see that it totally shapes the way how one space connects to the other, how the interior is connected to the landscape, to the exterior, to your neighbor. So that the kind of definition of window happens in such frequency and intensity that it is something that shapes the idea of this house, or house, so to say. And in RAM house was a RAM as a kind of a slope that connects in a gentle manner from one point to another. In this situation, the RAM house was a concept that we obviously use as circulation that connects from the ground to all the way to the rooftop. But more importantly, we begin to want to interrogate it as a kind of skin, as a kind of a second layer, a kind of continuous balcony rather than RAM, where spaces are filtered and joined, but kind of create this layering to perform a kind of effective climatic buffer of in terms of both privacy as well as modulating the amount of light and rain coming through to the inner layer. And how that RAM, beyond just kind of connecting from the different floors, but begin to circulate and structure and organize the way the house is designed. And one of the effects that we realized that this RAM kind of creates is a corridor that allow for kind of constant cross circulation. It induces a certain airflow that really kind of like cool the place. Going up, and in some ways, as a kind of the way you relate to the garden or your surrounding landscape become more intimate, where we expect the trees to come in and then brush you, so that you have that almost like in this case, that when you're upper level, you're almost like walking along treetops. Aerial view, bird's eye view of what the house turns out to be. That spiral, the circulation, the RAM spirals around the house, eventually terminating at the rooftop pool. Cloister House was a project that we were confronted in the sense that we have been building in Singapore in a way, and through different scale from terraces, semi-detached, detached, GCBs, and when we were commissioned to do the project, we were faced with this reality that the land was extraordinarily large, because it's in JB, that they could afford that size of a real estate. It's about, if I recall correctly, about 45,000 square feet, and that was was something that set us thinking, because in terms of scale, given the program of very large house, we were building about 12 to 15,000 square feet, and I put it in a single floor. This is what I occupied. There's still plenty of space left. And that gave us the opportunity to think that, yeah, then perhaps we could do, for the first time, a really flat house, a single story building, so to speak, that you can be connected really to the ground in every space, and without the need for any staircase. And this is the form that arises, the massing. I will not go too much into it, but to touch on the salient point, that the courtyard is the cloisters that arises from it, and then we look at references, because we were also thinking, how do we create a sense of luxury? It's a very large house, it's a villa, and can single story be luxurious in the sense, because that was question posed, that how it could be humble and yet luxurious in the sense of life in its own. So we look at examples like the famous 33rd Lane by Jeffrey Bauer, his own house in Colombo. We look at the House of Ron in Bombay, was a relic. We retrieve the plan, we kind of measure in terms of the scale. So the cloister house in the middle kind of measure up is a kind of hybrid between the two, closer to the House of Ron, but in some intimate way relating to the intimacy that we found in the 33rd Lane house. And this is some of the pictures that I show of the house from the streets and from the sky. And the interiors, where as a cloister, we begin to see the question, the idea of can cloister or a corridor around a courtyard be space rather than circulation? They take on meaning that this idea of circulation is being occupied. And because I think there's a certain beauty and transient quality that goes with corridor, which is kind of underpin our investigation of these multiple courtyard houses, that where the spaces are fluid, they are not so structured, they are defined by the adjacency to the courtyards that was planted within the plan, but also by the slope of the roof that slopes towards the courtyard. So the ridges and the slopes begin to give character to the different pockets of spaces or corridor, and you find your own use to that. There some space feel more generous, there are more light coming from there, the courtyard attracts more bird, and you begin to have a kind of, to imagine an interior that is fluid, that could be kind of adjusted as life unfolds. And you have situations that's tight, and that becomes a tight alleyway. You could have a bar, and you have corner that you can hide away. You have art, and then you have reading corner or as such. So there are different opportunities where the space is less of rooms, but of this kind of less determinate situations. So the front part I share with you, a couple of houses that kind of work along that idea of interrogating, of kind of mixing certain types, kind of cross-pollination of types to create spaces, navigating really between the boundaries, sometimes having more of the other, but always in the kind of tight balance. And the open malls that we were commissioned through a competition that we won and completed in 2015 was an interesting interrogation of what a mosque was. Because in parallel competition, the mosque has gone through a certain a series of transformation over the years in Singapore. You know, it goes through the colonial period. There's a grand mosque period where you have this defined by this super tall minaret with the onion dome that is dated, that is all over certain key old HDB estates. And then in the 80s, it went into this vernacular mode, I think quite in sync with the time where, you know, critical regionalism vernacular form was the talk of the day. And then it went to this in the mid 90s to late 2000, and done by one of the most significant contribution by Kokiang, a foreign architect, the malls that they, under this idea of urban compact design. And then when the competition was held in 2012, they were questioning and what's next and what is the continuous evolution of the malls typology. And interestingly, it happened in a time in I'm sure some of you may still remember the passing of the Swiss minaret referendum, where in the West there is this conservative, southern conservative kind of approach and regard to Islam, where in November 2009, the banning of minaret in Switzerland, and that these are some of the images that was that arises from the fraternity, the different kind of response that happens, and so the project is placed in that context. So we were looking at a very open and futuristic idea that how the most of the past was kind of closed, protected, which good reason for, and it's kind of fixed in terms of layout. And what we are thinking of something for the future would be more open to the community, to the surrounding, and more connected. So it's not less introverted and very flexible in terms of change. Because one of the concerns that we see as the malls reaches like 20 years, it has to go for A&A, and the whole congregation has to move out of the malls to a temporary location for construction to continue for 1 year. But we thought we could build something in place so that player hall continue operation while the building could be extended upwards and skywards. So that was the underpins our design in the beginning, and how certain clarity could come out in terms of the massing, where different blocks will be clear in defining the specific function. The main player hall, the alive function, which is essentially education, and the administrative block. Yeah. But the what really underpins this was the idea that could malls be open. The idea of openness begin to that we brought in to this the mix, and with open malls, it challenges immediately, which means that there is a balancing act that we have to strike, that walk on the tightrope between what is really open, aspirationally in all intent and purpose, idea open in terms of visual, open to the climate, so that it could be well ventilated, good indirect daylight, but the openness precisely also has posed problem in the other spectrum, where how do you with openness safeguard the sanity that's needed, the creation of threshold, the idea of permanence, the idea of privacy or shelter from the monsoon rain, that from a climatic point of view. So the image on the left was a competition model, and that itself was transformed in a built 2015 model, which is very accurate in the sense of what it is now, which is kind of the two images to illustrate. In a competition, normally for all clarity, you are doing things in such a way that you simplify certain resolution to kind of privilege clarity of information. But what I love about the built work is really that is what we are always situating ourselves, that the clarity may, as long as we strive to achieve, is never that clear, because you are dealing with mixing of types. There's always two scenarios at the same time. But we feel the relevance of that because that is something that most of the time work, a hybrid situation. But then what is the difference would be, how do you navigate in this landscape while to secure enough clarity to the work of art or work of architecture, in a sense that could be to be clear and when they have two rather than one thing. And that's something that a terrain that we have constantly have put ourselves in, because we believe that is a method that has always served us well, and a way of kind of intellectually conceiving and kind of lending rigor to our works. So we can see this while open, yet it is closed. So the strategy and the articulation and detailing constantly has to navigate between to allow the right degree amount of openness at times, and while allowing that sense of what the institutions should have to safeguard what is necessary. Because this photo is something that we took during construction to show that is the situation of the context that we are in, that proximity to the backyard or the kitchen of the HDB block. This is something that is unique to Singapore or Hong Kong or cities where density is always that parameters, a context that we constantly have to deal with. That how openness in that sense is controlled, the right filtering of connection to nature without looking at the laundry of your neighbors, of bringing air into this space to cool the entire naturally ventilated space without the use of a big ass fan, and have cooling measures to cater to extended prayer spaces, the need of that, the creation of a threshold, the difference in what is a sacred space versus the street is through this kind of formal, in this case, the barb and the arches and the slightly raise in height dealing with in a different way, dealing with the balancing act of being open and sacred at the same time. And that kind of structure or framework trigger down to every details of the space. Constantly is the balancing up between the two. What is porous? What is too porous? How in measure of visual versus air circulation, rain. So hence this is an exercise in which where a conceptual framework to be realized has to be realized through every step of the way, because it finds its content precisely through this. The idea of openness is not a single one-liner, but openness at all levels. Where moments could be really as transparent as good, where certain part could be safeguarded. So there's balancing of both. You can see from this is a view from the kitchens of the adjacent HDB flats blocks. Coming to this, the garden envelope is a recently completed project that I'm excited to share, where we look at the question, the idea of office use-wise is office use, a low-rise, a mid-rise kind of office block in South Beach Road. Which very often we found ourselves, the idea question, the envelope of an office is often a curtain wall with screen that is of a certain depth. That what would happen if this envelope has more depth to it, has thickness, has space? That in this case was something that we try to develop, this idea of a garden and a curtain wall together. The view from I like to show this picture because it was just taken from by Fabian, which is very enthusiastic. He took this from Marina Sands, and you can see the building in this context. And we are happy that we have made a little contribution to the skyline of Singapore in our own little way. And up front along South Bridge Road, this is what you see, the new block that comes out. And to share 2016, this is what was before we transform it. And what really kind of started us thinking was this idea: the entire street block is UD control. There's environment envelope control, because it's not the parcel is not conserved. It's not further block. There are certain selected buildings that are conserved, but this entire block is mostly under envelope control by URA. So many envelope control, you need to keep to a certain street front and alignment, and the building height is 6 to 7, I think 6 story, where we obviously the client want to maximize, since they are going to tear down and rebuild to create better volumes and by higher ceiling rentable office space. But we realized, so we put the service core, the escape, on the site, which is more effective, allowing the rest of the space to be leasable as office space. But then we begin to do a massing study based on volumes and areas, that if we were to maximize the kind of given floor areas and envelope, right? And given the floor area, we will have this kind of what I call kinky back, because the front has to be aligned and to the urban grid, where the back could be allowed to be kink, because you couldn't fully maximize the GFA unless you build lower. And alternatively, within the envelope as a maximum kind of approach, and our way of making sense of it is to kind of design a courtyard, an internal courtyard to this block, which is kind of similar to shop houses, where you can use the courtyard as kind of like internal way to daylight and bringing air circulation. But we thought, okay, if you are doing that, I mean, that's it'll be hidden, isn't it? It will be kind of like an introverted reaction to the plan. And we realized maybe we could push the plan of the courtyard, the kind of empty space, the space of that non-floor space to the edge, into a perimeter, so that the yellow part is what is really kind of like clean, neat, open plan space, that you have this kind of a white space created that could be kind of like a perimeter courtyard, conceptually, that has a veil, which is the curtain wall or kind of screen that needs to be there to align to the street, to the urban block. And then we introduced a thing called pockets of sky garden and work pods as a further extension. So what are they? They are different for every floor, that each of these will be extended floor spaces, but on the roof, it will be a walkout kind of a sky terrace or garden. So you have this kind of permutation for different floors, different sizes, catering for different needs for the floors. And so this shows axonometric elevation and section of what I'm talking about, where suddenly this layer of becomes activated, that from a program point of view, we begin to see that offices in a homogeneous layout open plan, right? There are always two types of spaces. You know, you have workspaces, right? But there's meeting rooms, and there are like maybe brainstorming spaces for discourse and meetings. Those spaces, in fact, will be the so-called nice spaces that maybe want to showcase. So in this case, that's why the different volumes that we created around parameters allow for that various functions, that they could be intimate, a two-person meeting, to a meeting room, to a sizable, even a kind of a small amphitheater stage that allow for a certain kind of bigger discussion or seminar that could be occurring in this zone, while the more open plan within would be your otherwise more structured open plan design, or your divisions of your work desk. That if you do that, there's this idea that in selected pockets, this becomes the face of work, that the work can have a face, because otherwise, you look at most offices, right? They are hidden behind a veil of a roller blind, because of it's just too intense in terms of heat, in terms of privacy, that rarely you get to see the work, maybe except when the office is still lit at night. A close-up of what it's like, that most of you alternate this between the two spheres, one that's veiled and one that are selected portion of it is open, apertures that open either to the part of this pod's interior or part of what is on the roof, which is the green terraces. View from the front and from the top, from the bottom. And we kind of like that. The veil serves many purposes, obviously, because that what is behind will be your standard curtain wall kind of finish, which is full glass, nice, perfect. But I think with this filter and the layers of tropical green as a kind of a garden spaces, you begin to read from the interior a city in the context of a garden, a foreground that filters, that give privacy and kind of moderate the amount of daylight penetrating the office space. So in a hope to make a kind of roller blind redundant, in this situation, that this is served by another means. Looking from inside, that this the way we manipulate the mesh, that we begin to create folds that help to deflect the kind of daylight, simulating what the plants actually is doing in a way. Because of their form, they are deflecting lights are landing on different surfaces, creating this natural play of a delightful kind of light falling on that surface. A glimpse of what is in between this zone, this space of perimeter courtyard. There are tight spaces of pods, but you can have that sectional effect of communicating between levels, where, like, we love that because in a way the pods allow the planting to be of different heights, a kind of staggered situation, simulating what I always kind of like to emulate the kind of tropical rainforest, right, where trees and foliage exist in different layers and sections that combine to create this kind of like intriguing kind of landscape. That you have that relation and very intimate in the sense that when you are out here, you are sandwiched between what's at the back, your office space, and within this protected zone because of the veil to what is in the urban situation. And of course, with the mesh itself, the meshed envelope changes shape. In certain time of day, it seems opaque, solid and strong. As the light falls, it becomes transparent and reveals what is behind and within to create, so that the facade itself is an animated surface that transforms with the passing of the day and react to the urban situation in the manner that is alive. This is the view from the back. So the interesting thing is that we had the kind of the standard kind of curtain wall front at the back lane, but the site is a different, more protected perimeter courtyard that envelopes the office building. Yeah. And the same view, as nightfall, the plants take on a different dimension that appears suddenly, because then you reach a full transparency of the filter. Okay, coming to the last and one of the smallest project was a bench design that we proposed for, which the exercise was, of course, nobody curated a lunch and farm in recycling and reusing, repurposing the planks that you found in the old Kallang National Stadium, and a very meaningful project that has been around and been deployed all over Singapore. And this is our entry. So I think one of our objectives was interesting because it was the product is a bench, right? Furniture. And we begin to see, how do we design that in the building? We have that parameters. So one other thing is that it has to remember the National Stadium, because we want to be as close to that, because in the stadium, it is planks that you sit on. So, and we remember the stadium, what was synonymous was during the good old days of our football glory is the Kallang Wave. There's the people that forms that, the idea of unity. And so we want to kind of, the hope that this furniture, this bench will communicate this idea that together we stand. So we were given 16 planks, and we thought that, okay, to form a little circle, use totally 16 planks with almost minor alteration to the planks, deploy them in a circle. And in section, this circle forms a wave. So a very simple idea that starts from there. And then, because we thought, how do we communicate unity? Because obviously circle is full. So symbolism with that, because we want to create, maybe perhaps unity could be strengthened by kind of communicating this idea that of fragility or instability. Then, so in an interesting way, then this type will challenge what a bench should be, which is stable. for this bench to be our bench to be successful, it must have this idea that it's fragile and it's unstable. And of course, then with that kind of framework, it began to kind of frame the way we design in detail. That each plank, as simple as it is, keep to its original size and dimension. This will be supported by 2 rods, which on its own will surely fall, right? Because there's no stability in the other direction. And to be joined in this above diagram, a kind of a wave, and to be connected to each other so that they form a kind of rigidity. So of course the detail comes in that joint. How do we do a joint so that it still looks fragile and that this will collapse in any time? And of course the geometry was a challenge, that you have a convex and concave surface that needs to be linked by the side. Obviously there are a lot more easier solution, but if you do express this joint, it must be visible. So that sets the criteria that it shouldn't be hidden on its underbelly. It has to be exposed on the edge. The edge has these 2 conditions, a concave and convex side. So we thought about the use of a hinge, that the idea of hinge in this very delicate way looks very fragile because the connection is on the pin, but also in a very clever way, it resolved the situation of a connection plate that could deal with the issue of that convex and concave geometry. And this is what it was like deployed only in 2 locations, unfortunately, in Dhoby Ghaut and URA for that limited time, because it's just too large to be placed anywhere in our public spaces. That was what I was told. And the end. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan. I don't know if people can hear me. Yeah, okay, people can hear me. Thank you, Alan. I need a bit of time to reconcile the ideas based on what I just saw. And so thanks again for sharing all of what you are doing within your practice. And actually, there is something that is quite striking in what you have been sharing. There is a constant element that comes back in your practice, and I was wondering whether it is the idea of a typology or whether it is the idea of thicknesses, the thickness, because you talk about boundary, you talk about connection, you talk about porosity, you talk about envelope, and whatever you are doing every time in all of the projects, you always have this idea of the thickness, almost in a classical way. When we look at classical building with very thick walls that you can inhabit. And so is it something that you do in your practice? Is it something that you are always looking at, this idea of thicknesses, going through the envelope and so on?
Okay, this is more a question of motivation and rather than methods. Yes, we do occupy ourselves fairly on envelopes and skin, because that is one of the major elements of architecture, isn't it? Beyond programs and space,
Yes.
is always the most important interface between the interior and the exterior, which is really the climate, tropical climate in terms of the city. So is that layer, the threshold or the skin, as you put it, is obviously the surface that we will always constantly interrogate. That's one. But 2, also as a response, because we'll be always constantly part of what motivates us is what we like to question, what is the predominant paradigm. That why we look at situation that our cities and buildings becomes more and more flat. Obviously, we all would know what drives that, or with efficiency, with constructability. There are forces that create this situation, that the building or envelopes are increasingly alight, which is not a problem in my opinion. But when it becomes the main paradigm, where building is going to be, that is the only way forward, we like to question it, because precisely that's where we could intervene and question, and also perhaps suggest that with thickness, certain values could be are lost if everything is just flat and slick. That in situation that we would like to offer through the project and engaging in these surfaces, opportunities where with thicknesses, either spaces or connections or even poetic moments or enjoyment could be afforded.
Yeah, and in this, thank you for saying this, because the idea of the thickness and inhabiting the thickness and the layering, it is something that is essential in architecture. And in the case of the mosque that you did, not only there is the thickness of the building itself, but also the fact of having the different buildings, and with the remaining spaces in between, then there are opportunities. New opportunities that are arising from this massing. And in this, when you were working on this very magical project, it's quite a fantastic, I had the chance of visiting it, so it's a fantastic project. Did it inform other projects that you were doing concurrently? Because it's a unique program, and whatever you were exploring there, did it happen that it informed other projects?
In fact, when we were doing the mosque, it is our houses that inform the way we design the mosque. That was because we have been doing houses, and the house typology has a lot to offer, because we first of all find striking similarities in terms of rituals and how it's used. For one, in a mosque, you don't wear shoes, just like in the house. In an Asian context, that you move around the spaces barefoot, and that kind of body connection is very similar to a house. There are certain moments of creation of space that that when we were dealing with various houses was kind of borrowed. The idea of ablution, cleaning, the certain steps to go through. The houses of the past, so to speak, was beneficial, was useful in feeding us certain strategies. But of course, when we look at the mosque as a type, there's which in my slide we demonstrate that we have to always look into the past, look at the mosques of the past, why the language certain ways, how is space certain ways, why is it enclosed, to acknowledge that there is the creation, the idea of invention or was not in our case abandonment of what was working in the first place. It is more of recognizing that and to find alternative way, while respecting some of this is still very relevant and in fact needed. And while we were, so what was interesting was that what's next when it comes to the next generation of mosques, and especially in the context that that Kokyang has done such a tremendous good job with his mosque. We were thinking what's next. It was ultra modern mosque, and we figured and realized the opportunity was that in this the contemporary, because they wanted contemporary mosque, meaning a mosque of its time, a mosque relating to this period. And I think the openness, as I mentioned, has a lot of bearing in this particular moment in history, where it could be useful to talk about bridging harmony, bridging understanding, rather than so that is an extra motivation and intent. But what that being said, is the whole series of being open has to be resolved, which produce this product. There is a resolution of wanting to be open but yet closed at the same time. This idea of treading between the two polarities. Yeah.
Okay, but then thanks again for sharing a bit more on that. In this project and also in the project that you shared before, this inverted courtyard for the house in JB, there is something that is quite striking. Again, it is the idea of movement. It seems that in the project that you are doing, you are addressing all of this movement, all of this interaction How do I perceive a space? How do I move from one space to another? Is the space larger, narrower, the perspective, the views? So beyond the filter, the thicknesses and the typology, is it something that you address as well, the idea of moving inside and outside some spaces?
Okay, there's a lag. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yes.
Okay. There's a lag in the video. So
yes.
Okay, in response to your question, yes, in the series book that we do, a dominant theme will be this idea of moving within the house or within the space. That let's say the house, right? It shouldn't be kind of like, which is a kind of the accepted norm, that there are a series of rooms or functional spaces that you dine, you go to the study, to work, you go to the bed to sleep. But I feel that we love to highlight this idea of movement, of going from spaces, where this idea of transience, this idea of could be a lot more accentuated and kind of purposefully designed, so that they are experienced. They are not accidental moment, but something that you could weave into the space, and that's something that you can see in the recurring theme, terrace house, oyster, in that we were always like mindful of that while in any case you need to move from point A to B, why not that be a kind of extra, the plus, the added experience, that and of course related to what a kind of preoccupation that we were always into about integrating nature, or how within a house, how within a space you relate to nature, that you are always aware the passing of the day, the passage of the day, the sun streaming through the landscape. A garden is not just a curated or crafted kind of scenery, but there's life, there are birds, the sound of that you became the inhabitants, hopefully will be an active participant to that. Yeah.
And talking about nature, your practice is based in Singapore, and so you are doing quite an extensive project in Singapore, but also outside of Singapore. How is it when you do some project in another context? Because you talk about nature, you talk about how the climate is also having an impact on your way of generating spaces and buildings. How is it when it is outside of Singapore?
The key difference would be, in Singapore we are extremely familiar. We grew up in the city, and you are totally aware and in tune with its context, its history, and its culture, and its what is moving forward and its future. But the break, working overseas, is always a refreshing take for us, and we really like to embrace it, because you are confronted with different culture, different dynamics. We were in recent year heavily involved in China, in second tier, third tier, 2.5 tier cities in China, not in Beijing, Shanghai area, which has a certain peculiarity, to in that moment in time of a major city transformation from rural to a more urbanized condition, and these are works that is in a different context, obviously a different climate altogether, one that is thoroughly template and in fact, which give us a new set of parameters to work with. But the thing is this, that these are parameters, so to us that's why a framework is important, because we will use the same conceptual framework to kind of digest and kind of like weave and interpret, and also see the challenges of the peculiar context of typology, to begin to also offer our own kind of suggestions. Like in case in point, in China we did quite a fair bit of a sales gallery, which is you have sales gallery in Singapore, which is constructed for the purpose of the sales of the condominium or the flats, right? And we see as a large as a tremendous waste, because even in Singapore, it occupies normally on precious land or temporary land. You get this thing up, fantastic building, and you kind of like knock it down once its purpose is in served. And in China, that is the norm. They build huge tract of sales gallery, expensive materials. And part of the suggestion and transformation that we introduced was that we begin to design this not as temporary building. We design it and we submit it, of course, with all pain and of course a heavy restriction to the design, because of it is recognized not as a transient temporary building, but they are the final building with slight modification. So the scale galleries will take on a second life. So some of them become a preschool, a kindergarten with slight modification. Some of it become a community center. Some of it becomes the clubhouse, commercial elements of the place, or amenities. They offer amenities. So day one, they are kind of conceived as dual use. What I like to say, a sales gallery by birth, but something else in the afterlife. So I think that makes a lot of challenge. It is definitely more difficult, but almost conceiving a building as a shell, which is interesting because any building type, as you can see, a cinema has become churches, in Singapore. Right? So I feel then the program, although inform the space, but the space could have its own attribute, whether it's a mosque, a house, or a sales gallery, that when the program change, you still can adapt and you can still kind of appreciate, because the user won't change, right?
I think that's great. That to say the space can have its own attributes, because we tend to assign heavily a program, a function, a usage to a space, while actually by itself the space can be what it stands for. So that's quite a strong statement, and even towards the future, towards reversibility of buildings, when we see that we are still constructing heavily offices. The question is what will happen with this building in the future? Can they be retransformed? Can they be repurposed? And I'm glad to hear that from something that is highly non-sustainable, that you are utilizing that into something that is more sustainable. So that's actually a very good point, very strong point. What's next for Formworks? Formworks has grown so much over the years. I visited your office like a few years ago. It was quite an impressive moment. Like, oh wow, so many people, that was not expected. Why I say that was not expected is because in your project there is a very strong sincerity, something highly genuine and understated at the same time, and that's why when we hear, a new project from Formworks, so they're doing this, and like, oh wow, actually it's quite a lot of production. So that's why we are wondering what's next for Formworks. So do you have something in the pipeline? Although it's difficult times for our industry, we all recognize that, but something exciting to share? If you can share, of course.
There's something coming up pretty exciting, but I'm under non-disclosure clause. So right. It's in the city. I can give clue. It's in the city. Okay. It's a district. It is not a single building. It is a district. It's a conserved area near the waterfront.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. That's great to hear.
That is rejuvenation. That's something that is that I'm working together with another architectural firm that I cannot disclose also, because that will do too much. Okay. But there's something that's coming up. Yeah.
Okay. And on a personal level, because you were the director of ArchiFest, will you be, for example, are you aiming to be the curator of the next Singapore pavilion at the Venice Biennale in 2023?
Yes, there's something that maybe post-COVID, or I don't know, is something that I would love to. In fact, even if we would open about it, even the next Singapore Pavilion, which I think Waha and Salad Dressing did a fantastic job. I was so envious because Salad Dressing shared the office with us, and I can see the wonderful content that they are putting up for the show, and that really is something that I'll be interested in to kind of as a platform to communicate in the values and the ideas that we have. Yeah,
I think that's great. I think we are reaching the end of our talk. It was very, very interesting, and I'm once again very honored to have you with us today, Alan. I wish we could be in the same space. And to congratulate you for all of the work that you are doing with your team. Formworks is definitely a very strong firm in Singapore and in the region. Like a lot of seminal work that you are doing that are highly recognizable as well, and very inspiring for the next generation of architects. So I would like to really wish you the best in these trying times. We know once again that the industry is in difficult situation, but at the same time, maybe it's the time of renaissance and to reinvent ourselves in these times. And I'm pretty sure that Formworks is taking part to this reinvention of our industry. So thanks again so much, Alan. Congratulations for all of the work that you've been doing with your team. And so I will pass on that to Maria for the final notes and for the next talk to come the following month.
Thank you,
once again, thank you, Alan. Thank you so much. Thank you. So Maria.
Hello again, Alan.
Hello.
Thank you. Fantastic presentation. I believe you have awakened everyone's creative ideas after this exposure. It's very, very powerful, different, and inspiring. So thank you very much. From Cosentino family, we really appreciate your time and with us, and thank you again for being part of this TAP series. Thank you very much to our audience who is supporting TAP series every month. It means a lot for us, your support, and I hope everyone is learning and enjoying with TAP series. Jan, thanks million again. And we see you next month in Malaysia.
Yes,
virtually.
Virtually in Malaysia, yes.
So thank you very much.
Yes, thanks again.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Maya.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Bye.
Jan.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Are we out?